Isn't that just the best song? No doubt can restrain the praise of our God. Well, good morning. I have my customary seminary education update for you. Right now I'm in a program called Clinical Pastoral Education. And basically that means that each week I'm spending about 25 hours at Kauai Delta Hospital, being a chaplain there. And then I'm spending one full day each week in class in Fresno, finding out how badly I messed up trying to take care of people at Kauai Delta. It's great. Super fun. And here's something confessional. I don't like it very much. I don't mind the criticism, and I don't mind sick and hurting people. That's not it. What I mind is that what's completely missing from chaplaincy work is ongoing relationship. The ability to help people to take the next steps into a more abundant life in Jesus Christ. And I miss being able to say that great phrase, "You should come to my church." I miss it. Because people really need Jesus. And one of the main reasons that I see that right now is that people in the hospital, they want to talk about sin a lot. They want to find some spiritual reason for the mess that they find themselves in. Sometimes it's the sin of other people that they want to talk about. They want to place blame on a parent or a spouse or a child or a doctor. Sometimes it's the sins of the world, and unbelievable things will come out of people's mouths trying to explain cancer or miscarriage or a terminal illness. Sometimes, and this is the one that really breaks my heart, sometimes it'll be a question. "Chaplain, what did I do to make God punish me with this? Help me figure out how I've sinned." Grace and peace to you from God our Creator and from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Sin. It's a scary word for a scary concept. A word that we're taught has eternal consequences, and a word that's been defined a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. When Luther spoke of sin in a serious way, he talked about an inward turn, selfishness, self-reliance instead of trusting in God, and harming others. But others at that time were defining sin differently. And they accused Martin Luther of sin when he spoke out against those in power, and when he questioned the status quo and disobeyed. And in 1521, he wrote these great words to a fellow theologian named Melanchthon that was struggling with some of the same issues. And he wrote, "Be a sinner and sin boldly, but believe and rejoice in Christ even more boldly." Great words. I think that maybe what Luther was trying to stop in Melanchthon was that same way of thinking about sin as that bewildered gentleman that asked me for help this week, figuring out what sin God was punishing him for. What disobedience? What sins was Luther bold about? Well, people reading the Bible in their own language, speaking out against corrupt priests and monks, disagreeing with the Pope. What about you? Have you ever been accused of sin for what you believe as a Lutheran Christian? I have. I've been called a sinner for telling individuals that are rejected by some churches that God loves them. I've been called a sinner for not believing that we as a church body should withhold fellowship from people that have harmed others in the past. And this is the one that really gets me, I've been called a sinner for having the audacity to stand in this space as a female. And the people that have told me that would say that all of you are committing a sin right now for allowing it. Amen. And maybe more so for listening but it's not an excuse to get an early donut today. But I think I'm able to weather these accusations because I know that God is for me. And I can love and preach and embrace and invite, because when we know that God is for us, we can take risks for others. I can risk standing up here for the chance that I have something to say about God's love that someone needs to hear. We can all risk bringing our brokenness into this place and saying to others that we love them. This story in Matthew, well, it seems to be all about risk, doesn't it? Risking the boss's money while he's away for a long time. Maybe you've heard some things about this story before. Someone may have pointed out Matthew's little whiff of fire and brimstone, that weeping and gnashing of teeth. Another popular idea is that this story in Matthew supports the prosperity theology that Brian was talking about a few weeks ago. Kind of seems like it, doesn't it? The rich get richer, and the poor get poorer, and it might even be Jesus that's doing that doling out and taking away. I gotta say, because of these associations, I've never much liked this parable. But God is for us, so we can take the risk of delving into it, right? So I'm going to start that risk-taking right off the bat by outright rejecting those two ideas. I don't think that this parable suddenly shows us a God that's without grace, who supports a slave owner taking riches away from the poorest of a group of people. That doesn't match the God that's revealed elsewhere in the Gospel of Matthew. So what is this parable about? Well, I think first of all, we may need to consider the possibility that this is not really about stuff. It's not about material goods. But maybe this parable is really about responsibility. The responsibility to enlarge the active reign of God in the world is represented in these talents. The verdict that comes down for the three slaves is whether or not they've used what the master has given, whether or not they have actively sought the good of the master in this time of opportunity. This gift is a responsibility and a task. No instructions are given to the slaves, but they all know that the wealth is to be increased. The third slave, he was afraid, so he froze. Fear can do that, can't it? We don't know anything about the feelings of the other two slaves. Did they love their master? Did they fear too, but that fear spurred them on to work harder? Did they anticipate entering into the joy of their master? Maybe they were just natural-born risk-takers. We don't know. All that we know is that they behaved differently. And that behavior drastically changed the relationship they had with their master. I think the problem of the third slave is that he doesn't know that God is for him. So he takes no risk. And then he can't know the joy of knowing that God is for him. It's kind of circular. But in that spiral, the third slave condemns himself to a life that doesn't know joy. Risky behavior was part of the master's business, and they all knew that. But the third slave was too afraid to take that risk. And instead, he attempted to secure only his own well-being. That inward turn, that's Luther's real definition of sin. How these three people lived while their master was absent is important to Jesus. Two are deemed good, and the third wicked. What does that mean? Well, Jesus answers those questions in other parts of Matthew's Gospel. Good is described in chapter 7, verses 17 and 18, when Jesus says that every good tree bears good fruit. Someone who is good takes actions that are reflective and consistent with what they say is their inner commitment. Wickedness, in contrast, is defined in this gospel as those who are opposed to God's purposes. And in this story, Opposition to God's purposes simply takes the form of not being actively involved in them. Doing nothing is opposition. I would even say that opposing God's purposes in this story may mean preserving what we have and not taking risks. Because let's be honest, this story is not about 3 slaves in ancient Palestine. This story is about us, the church, those who have been entrusted with the responsibility of God's active reign in the world during the long delay before Christ's return. What will we do with that responsibility? I think that God expects from us not passive, careful waiting, but active, consistent work and risk in order to enlarge God's purposes on earth. And because God is for us, we can do this. We can do the work and take the risks to serve others. The good news here is that Jesus predicts that faithful, risk-taking members of the church are going to be the majority. And he also makes it clear that everyone has different abilities. Just like the talents were doled out in 5 and 2 and 1, the question is not, are you risking as much as the person next to you? But the question is, are you risking according to what you've been given? Seen in this light, the giving of more to those who took the risk and taking away from the one who didn't finally makes sense to me. Because the life of Christian risk, it's not a test. It's not a test for which we're rewarded. But instead, that life, it is the reward. I really believe this. This is it. The reward itself is the security that God is for us. And the more we live that risky, exciting, abundant life, the more we get of it. But that abundance, it's never just for our own benefit, but for the sake of others. And for the sake of others, we can resist a culture that overlooks God's intention to love. We can actively question claims about God that simply perpetuate that inward turn and idolatry of the individual. We don't need to hedge when it comes to being fully human. We can let others affect us. We can be outraged. We can be sad. We can be happy. We can enjoy things. We can have an abundant life. We can sin boldly, knowing our shortcomings, being authentic, and helping others to do the same. Because God's love and mercy and grace are for us. The important question then is, what does sinning boldly look like for you? What kind of risk for others will stretch you and enlarge God's purposes? Is that risk serving here at Christ Lutheran? Somehow that you've been afraid to do before? Is it stepping into a small group or a Sunday school class? Is that risk a mission trip all the way to Thailand or maybe across town to the rescue mission or anywhere in between? Is that risk financial? Putting trust in God that we will have enough even if we give freely to others? Is that risk in service to the sick or poor or imprisoned or hungry? Is that risk seeing something wrong in the world and standing up for right, even if it means you're called a sinner? I encourage you to really ask yourself these questions and then get started. Jump in with both feet. Because the answer from God in all of these questions is God's insistence that a commitment to being the salt of the earth and the light for the world really, really matters. So sin boldly, because God is for you. Amen. Amen. Peace of the Lord be with you always. Please rise and share that peace.